Before we get started, it's going to be somewhat interactive. So let's start with that. Who was at the celebration for SmartStart's award and heard from the team yesterday?
Let's hear who danced.
Dancing is exactly what we want to be doing in celebration of this coalition's incredible work. So I'm going to introduce the panel and then quite briefly, because we really want to get into the conversation. And this is not a conversation about does ECD matter? I think we're all here because it does and we believe it does. We're going to have a conversation. So I want to make sure most of the time is you hearing from this incredible panel, but I will introduce them. So I will also have to juggle my microphone. In the introductions, Kalula. I want to start with you. Kalula Monana, Chief Director, Department of Basic Education in South Africa. Kalula heads the Chief Directorate responsible for ECD and reading literacy in the Department of Basic Education, where she played a central role in overseeing the historic transfer of the ECD function from the Department of Social Development in 2022. Please Google, LinkedIn, and really get in touch if you don't already know. Kalula, say hi.
Hello.
Then we come to Zahira Mohammed, who is CEO of Ilifa Labantwana. Zahira leads Ilifa Labantwana as CEO, which is has worked on South Africa's foremost ECD systems change organization, established in 2007 through a funder collaborative among Elmer Philanthropies, DG Murray Trust, and the UBS Optimus Foundation. Give yourselves a who if you're here. Yay, say hi.
Morning, everyone.
And I come to Grace, who I think we now only just say Grace because you're so famous. Needs no surname. CEO of SmartStart. Grace leads SmartStart, and for those who were there at the celebration, Skoll awardee, South Africa's leading early learning social franchise and 2026 Skoll Award for social innovation in the world. I won't say more about SmartStart because you already know or will find out more. Say hi, Grace.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. And Tess, coming to you. Tess Peacock is Executive Director of Equality Collective and Real Reform for ECD. Tess Peacock founded the Equality Collective in 2020, a community-embedded social justice organization based in the rural Eastern Cape. Please say hi. That is the introductions. Like I say, if you don't know these amazing pioneers, find out more. So, we're going to get into the conversation. I want to say a few things in framing. And as I said, it's somewhat interactive. There are people here who are very familiar with ECD as an area, people here who are interested in systems change more broadly, and maybe people here who just want to celebrate an amazing achievement and coalition. So if you hear an acronym and you don't know what it means, just put your hand up and then whoever's speaking will explain. It's fine, no shame. And then we will have some discussion after the panel. So in terms of framing it, in most countries, really, and a co-impact we fund organizations focused on systems change, especially for marginalized populations and for gender equity. And so we talk about systems change all the time. This is a system in some ways that is nascent and doesn't exist in many places. So let's start from that. So in South Africa, ECCE services, anyone going to put their hand up? Are independently provided. The government subsidizes access for children from low-income homes. And if you were there yesterday, Grace, I was very touched by your emphasis on intergenerational poverty and why this is important work. So the government subsidizes for low-income homes, but public funds have historically been very limited in terms of subsidies into this area, making it very difficult, limited in access. According to a census in 2021, The country had approximately over 42,000 programs. However, only a third were actually receiving government support, subsidies, and oversight. So addressing this is a huge challenge and not just a policy one. It would take a collaborative effort and a sustained effort by a collaboration and ecosystem of stakeholders. So let's find out more about that collaboration and ecosystem. I will go to the first question, and I should say for those who haven't seen me moderate a panel before, let's put it this way. We want to hear from all the panel. So if you go too long, I will, on their behalf, try and interrupt you so we can give them some space. So it's only for fellow panelists that I rudely interrupt when that happens. Okay, so the first question I have really, which you'll hear from the full panel on, is about, we're starting from the beginning. Can I just check something? Can people hear all right? Okay. Yep. And so I will be passing the microphone. Yes? Logistics, important. Thank you. So the first question is, let's start at the beginning. What was the state of the ECD ecosystem in South Africa 10 to 15 years ago? And why was a fundamentally different approach needed? I'm going to start on this side and ask Zahira and Grace to share what it looked like then.
Sure. So I think back 10 to 15 years ago, I was wearing a very different hat. Still involved in the early childhood development or ECCE ecosystem. I worked for government at that point in time. I worked for our Treasury Department that was responsible for allocating money for early childhood development. And I remember back in the day, the system, we struggled to allocate funding to early childhood development. And as you can see, it's something that government struggled with for many, many years. But if I think back to what the system looked like and what the inhibitors were, it was because there was actually a fragmented, the system itself was ineffective. And what I mean by that is that public money has got to flow through government. That's why it's government money. And the systems for money to flow through government, to reach actual practitioners, to reach women, to reach children, we didn't have the confidence that if we allocated any money, that it would actually get to the children that we needed it. So that was the one system that we felt wasn't fully developed. It wasn't fit for purpose. Our system then was very much designed for a very formalized type of provision and didn't meet the actual needs and requirements of the women and the children providing it. So that's the long and short of it. They couldn't get registered, they couldn't get onto government's radar. So therefore, it was no point from Treasury side back in the day, if I think back, to give money, because we felt no point allocating it if it's going to sit within a government system and not actually reach the children that it needed to reach. And then I suppose linked to that as well, that there was no information around even how many children were in the system. There was very little accountability mechanisms back then. And Thrive by 5, our outcomes measure that we used to measure the outcomes of children, didn't exist back in the day. So it was a desert. We did not know what was happening in terms of early childhood development, in terms of access to children. So that's what the systems weren't there, or they were badly or ill-fitting for the needs of our children and women running the system.
Yeah, so I guess I'd bring a slightly different perspective, but that just confirms what Zahira said. I was not in ECD 15 years ago, so I'll tell you what was going on. And I think it's a really important thing that South Africa had just released in 2012 a National Development Plan that identified ECD as a priority. I feel it's necessary to mention it because it's part of a very important infrastructure that enables when you see opportunity and not just problems. The other thing is, when I joined, there was a national integrated ECD policy that when I read it, I was encouraged. I thought, here is a community that's beginning to form towards the problem that it's trying to solve. I'm slightly reluctant to join the ECD sector, but I was persuaded by some of those things. So when we started SmartStart in 2015, and I joined at the beginning of 2016, there was a real distance between what the government system that we were interacting with were thinking about ECD and what the parents and the practitioners holding the actual ECCE on the ground were thinking and feeling about ECCE. If I may just say, the thing that I found really curious was, and you know, so I sort of come from a mental health background and was trained as a social worker. So I have a very clear sense of how a welfare mindset with very, very good intentions always thinks of a proportion of the population. Not everyone in a population is going to need welfare. And so when ECD is in social development, it does not see all children. It sees only a portion of children that we call in that system children in need of care. So in terms of systems, that mindset was, in my view, one of the biggest blockages.
Thank you, thank you. And in terms of the second part of the question, I think you addressed this, Zahira, why a fundamentally different approach was needed. From your perspective, coming from a different sector, but also seeing the 2012 opportunity, what would you say for you then, rather than what you know now, what did you think was fundamentally different that was needed in an approach?
Oh, I thought we said, okay. First of all, our 2012 National Development Plan is a social compact moment. It's a moment for South Africa to come together. I don't think we did a great job of keeping momentum and uniting the country at the time that it needed to around problems it identifies. So what was needed is that national leadership to lead us around a national development plan. The other thing that was needed is population level view, see all children. The ECD, the National Integrated ECD policy, really, really promising, was very aspirational. I mean, it does say progressive realization, but when you put aspiration ahead of the word progressive realization, everyone's focus is on what we would love for our children, not what is real for our children now. And so what was missing was like, how do we create a set of bridges, I'll call. I mean, sometimes I call it a ladder and a rung, lower the rung. How do we make these aspirational things that we want for our children accessible for the poorest communities? How do we get the actual insights of communities of mothers and parents and practitioners who, as you were introducing, really, this is a market, it's meant to be a market that works. But among the poorest children, there's market failure. There is just no supply for the latent demand. The demand is frustrated and quality is poor because people are making private arrangements. Go-Go's are looking after their children, and they're looking after their children really, really well, and children of families. And really, what was needed was like just a partnership that enables us to see the whole system together. For the government person in Kulula's position to see the children who are excluded at the same time as seeing other children. But actually, we believe if you solve for the most excluded, you basically create like a solution. What was also needed was partnerships with organizations like Ilifa Labantwana, who really are experts in public system strengthening. But if they don't see what we see in the communities we're solving for, we are friends, we work well, we get along, but we would continue to work in parallel with each other. What was also needed was the practitioner's own voice. Like for us to not see them as beneficiaries of our generosity, but as local partners closest to the problem we're trying to solve. And their voice needed to represent itself using agency that they already had. Okay. There, you want my mic.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's move to how the change happened. So I think we've heard about the context 10 to 15 years before and some of the key different approaches you were thinking about that were needed. So what did the early system building work actually look like in practice? I want to turn to other panel members, to Kolula, to share your perspective.
I think the context that my two colleagues have shared with us is very important because it kind of formed the basis of our understanding of what it was that we were receiving or we were about to receive when the shift, just for context, when the shift from social development to the Department of Basic Education, where I'm located, happened. It only happened about 2022. And Grace is telling us that the government's blueprint, which is the National Development Plan, pronounced that this function should shift from social development in 2012. So it just cares and shows the complexity of systems of government to be able to move a function, to take a decision and convert that decision into something practical and meaningful. So it took a decade before we saw that happen. And what we received was exactly what Grace and Zahira have painted for us, where there were huge gaps in terms of data systems. We understood that the other systems like the registration systems of getting us to know who is operating in the ECCE space is, what are the circumstances, where are the children, all of the children also that are accessing. So there were huge data gaps. And as a government who had been dealing with schools, there's a cushion in dealing with schools because you deal with something that has long been established. You have your set infrastructural systems that allow you to work with schools that are built, and you have support from other departments. We know where to get our teachers. We know that the teachers come to schools trained. So here we've got something totally different that really questioned our unknown reality as the Department of Basic Education. But we also received tons and tons of talent and community infrastructure that comes in the form of the women who have been running learning programs when they were still with social development, of the organizations. And these are my colleagues sitting with me here on this panel, and many of you who are sitting here with us today, we received that. So we knew that in the midst of the gloom, there was something that we could build with. Yes, there were issues around fragmentation. I think the experiment of that, we knew that we could tighten by strengthening where our systems were weak and where systems were non-existent, that we could start building systems to be able to really make the shift from social development meaningful for our children and for our families. There were huge access gaps. We still are battling access. We're still dealing with about 1 million children who are aged between 3 and 5 who have to come into access of early learning opportunities. That is the road that we are traveling as we're sitting here together. We are finding solutions that are really tailored for our context in South Africa to be able to bring those children into the access net. We said when we started establishing data systems, we started to understand that even those children who are accessing early learning programs, they have huge gaps themselves because I've just said that kind of trying to draw parallels between the schools and the early learning programs that we are receiving. That in schools you have teachers who are qualified, who are trained in universities. So quality issues are totally different to quality issues in the early learning space. Here, it's sometimes women who have just decided out of their own volition to start up an early learning program to get children away from the streets, giving them meaning in terms of when their parents are perhaps at work. And so that's the context in South Africa that we're trying to solution for. It's really, really, really complex, but it is rewarding when you have people that you can work with and you can solution with and you can really trial things with and make the difference. So that's what we received.
Okay, thank you. This is, let me ask for the systems thinking frame, Zahira, and then I'll come to you, Tess, as well.
I think in any country, not even South Africa, if you look at the levels of poverty and inequality, while programs are your delivery mechanism, we're always going to reach our children in early through a diversity of programs. But programs, to reach scale, they need to function within a system. And the system that we focus on in South Africa's two system is the delivery system, which is the work that SmartStart does, and the public system. And why the public system is so important is because government has got its role and its responsibility. It cannot renegade against its commitment to poor children. It's got a responsibility to make sure that poor children have access to early childhood development. Therefore, the only route to scale is through a public system. I suppose where our viewpoint in South Africa is different is to say government doesn't deliver. We're not talking about government rolling out programs. We live in a society where government needs to provide an enabling environment. So we want an enabling system that allows the practitioner, allows the women to thrive. Therefore, government's role is to create a system that grows the ECD sector. A public system that recognizes who they are, meets them basically where they are, and builds them up to where they need to be in terms of the quality that Kalula was talking about. And the other big system that we feel is really important for government is the financing system. Philanthropy has got a huge role to play. We understand that, but we firmly believe that the government must be the payer of early childhood development services. We're living in a country where fee payment is one of the biggest inhibitors to access early childhood development. Women cannot, caregivers are struggling to pay fees. Because they're struggling to pay fees, your early childhood practitioners or providers are not earning their income again. So it ends up being quite a cyclical thing. And that's the type of role or system that we need to solve for. So therefore, for us, from a public systems perspective, the regulatory environment, the quality system enables access. And then we need a financing public system to also come into play to make sure that what the other systems are sustained, and that the delivery system that Grace and her team are basically working on through the SmartStart type of interventions are also sustained at the end of the day. So we need both types of all the systems to basically work together.
Thank you. And then we'll come to the role of philanthropy towards the end as well. So Tess, would you like to add in terms of what the actual work looked like?
Yeah, thank you. So I think our role was a little bit more narrow in some senses. So we, within the broad goal of trying to achieve affordable, accessible, universal healthcare, we were kind of the main thinkers around what is the regulatory policy and law systems that are needed to be in place in order to achieve that. And what is the kind of movement energy that we need to build in the country to make sure that achieving that goal becomes a high priority within the state at all levels, political priority, executive priority, at the local level all the way to the national level. And that also includes trying to push for accountability and responsiveness in the state where necessary. And so we, together with our partners here, co-founded something called the Real Reform for Early Childhood Development Movement, which is supported by over 300 organizations and thousands of ECD practitioners. And we've just formed coalitions with unions as well to broaden that movement. And I think when I first came into the sector, so yes, we just had the Children's Act that was enacted, which was very much just regulating the existing providers. There was no kind of systems thinking about how to achieve universal access in that legislation, but we had an ECD policy that was much more lofty in its goals, and that came after the legislation was drafted. And I think the story, does start with how the organizations in this room got seeded in many ways. Obviously, it predates that as well. But DGMT and others starting, incubating both SmartStart and Ilifa almost essentially incubating us, meant that there was a strong sense of what were the things we wanted to achieve, years ago, and who was going to do it and where the strengths were. And so Ilifa seeing a lot in us about the legal expertise. There weren't any legal thinking happening in the ECD space when we first entered the sector. Ilifa kind of really seeing that was necessary and jumping on board. And then SmartStart very quickly partnering and us co-founding this movement. And at different times, we've ebbed and flowed around how to push and prioritize some of the reforms that we've pushed for. But we've created a really, really strong partnership and built consensus in the sector around some of the solutions. And I think that's made a strong department lead. It made the job a lot easier because you didn't have a fragmented sector pulling you in a million different directions. There was a lot of consensus, which meant that, the railway tracks were almost laid, and we could start getting into the kind of solution building and get momentum around key reform objectives. And so I also think it's just been a beautiful sisterhood in the sector of a lot of support with each other in the work that we've done over the years. Incredible mutual support and ebbing and flowing at different times and supporting each other in the trenches. And it's been a real gift doing this work over the last few years. A lot of sectors in South Africa have been shrinking in terms of the budget available, like much more fragmentation, this has been like a sector of hope, a sector of growth, a sector where we can build and collaborate. And it's been really, really wonderful and a real kind of career privilege to have worked in the sector over the last 5 years as well with everyone in the room and putting these systems in place and being able to now kind of be an example for other countries in the world and say, well, how do we actually think about systems work in early childhood development and other contexts? What can we learn? And how can we make sure that we continue to build on this momentum and actually build a success story that meets the million children that we still have to reach. And that's our goal. We still got a lot of hard work to do. But I think we need to ride this momentum, continue to invest in the work that we're doing so that we can really have the proper success story that we're all trying to achieve. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So that's the goal, 1 million by 2030. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So thank you, Tess. I think listening to this, often in the systems change world, it feels overwhelming in terms of the task. And I think what you've done is incredible. The coalition, the partnership, the thoughtfulness about the distinction between the sort of implementing of the service delivery and the kind of systems design with government, the window of opportunity and the partners in government being key, the 2012 policy being the window. So help people feel like it's less overwhelming by answering this question, which were, what were the 2 or 3 shifts that really unlocked the next level of progress after the initial work and coalitions were built? So Kulula, let me start with you. So remember, you're trying to leave people feeling, yes, it's doable.
It indeed is doable. And I think you've given us the very first shift when you spoke about the window of opportunity. So the very first catalyst was that function shift in 2022. It opened a rare window of opportunity that allowed us to dream again. It allowed us to reflect as the entire ECD ecosystem, to question our stale and ineffective ways of working, and to be able to realize that when we come together for impact, we can really create meaningful things. And so the shift was also in us simply asking the sector, what is it that you want from government? And they were very clear, articulating that we've been knocking on government's door, open the door. That was one message that we got from all kinds of directions. Open the door. Give us as government policy clarity. Do what you are set up to do. Enable us. We are here. We are actors who are committed, who want to do this, who've been doing this, who've been finding these solutions. But if we do not have a supportive government system, it all comes to naught. And so ours was very, very, very easy. It was simply to unlock the door. And so that was, thank you.
A bit harder than that.
Simply unlock the door. And so we're sitting here today really embracing what this ecosystem is and what it is able to do. So the second big shift was to be able to lay these rail tracks that Tess is referring to, making sure that we have systems, including data systems. We are sitting here today having a data and information system for children that is able to tell us where are children at, who is looking after those children in terms of those who run early learning programs. And so how do we register them? And so that is a system which we call the ECAS, Early Childhood Administration and Registration System, something that was not there. It is so powerful to know that you base your decisions and you plan informed by data and informed by evidence, and just having visibility of the sector. The other shift, I'm going to anchor it in our diversity. Our diversity, and as we know, diversity can be a challenge, but diversity is a big, big gift. That we have these many actors in the ecosystem who are very powerful, doing different things. What we realized we needed to do was to coordinate those efforts better. And that has brought us to looking at how we could do that. We knew we needed a strategy. And so again, as this collective in South Africa of actors, we put our heads together, developed a 2030 strategy.
And can I ask you to pass on to Tess on the coalition?
Yes.
Because I just want to make sure we have time.
All right.
Thank you.
I feel bad now.
If I collect a story.
You were talking about the coalition.
Yes,
It's a
okay.
collective story.
So I think I'll add two things that were unlocked. So there was a legal mind shift that was unlocked. So to stop seeing the law and regulation as a barrier, and just from a mindset of risk to a mindset of, well, how can we actually see flexibilities within the current legal framework? What are the ways that we can progressively support providers to get to their registration, full registration status? What can we unlock for them in the meantime? And there's also to dream about what is a better regulatory system that is more enabling and that has stronger kind of obligations on the state as well to expand, support, fund, etc., and reach the currently unreached. So that was number one, a clear legal mindset shift. And the other was this coalition movement building shift. So real reform for ECD, I think, has really helped build a strong base where practitioner voices are centered and prioritized. And that movement, what I think it does effectively and can continue to do, but is, it does a lot of media advocacy and has put ECD very much on the top of kind of the public imagination, much more than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, together with other partners, of course, and many work. I mean, this is not just a work of one movement, right? There's lots of us doing this work. But that's been a really, really important shift. And the ability to kind of move from supporting in technical committees, doing the technical drafting, but also being able to put pressure, public support and accountability where needed if things are stalling, and to ebb and flow between partnership and kind of pressure where necessary. And that's been the kind of work we've been having to do at Movement and Coalition, and a bit of that dance sometimes of constructive advocacy. But being able to have unlocked that, I think, has also been a good shift, because that's, that's what's going to help translate things to change actually on the ground at the local level, is to make sure that practitioners are behind the kind of reforms that are needed, that we're speaking in one language with consensus across the country, and not necessarily just at a national kind of top-down level. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And so, Grace, if you could just share again your perspective on something people should know here in terms of key shifts.
Yeah. And if you will indulge me, the one part of the system that was not described clearly enough, it feels to me, is the delivery system. And because I think that there's risk that we assume certain things and actually the assumptions are often wrong. So the way the delivery system works, what SmartStart has built in the last 10 years, is first of all, understand what it takes to start to close the supply gap. That means you go into communities where the gap is highest. You have to have the data for that. You identify women, which is the SmartStart model, and then we set them up. And so I'm just trying to say there is a system that's a value chain of work. That is one aspect of the delivery system. The second aspect of the delivery system, Kulula talked about, or someone talked about the Thrive by 5 data. That tells us that our child outcomes are not great. The child outcomes are not great for children in ECD programming, and the state of children outside of ECD is even worse. And so there is a layer of organizations that are often invisible in this system. They are some of the biggest enablers of where we get quality. And I think if we don't see that in the system, we assume that a great curriculum, great qualification, great infrastructure support and other great things will get us there. And so we don't want a strategic partnership with one of the richest sort of technical expertise in South Africa. At these organizations, some of them really 30 years old, started many, many years ago, when we were all excited about the 1994 shift. Just indulge me a little bit. They've been doing great work. They are disconnected from one another. And some of the disconnections are unfortunately, with the great intentions in the world, some philanthropic mindsets that unintentionally pit us against each other. And so, we end up competing when the real strength is in our collaboration. So I really feel a delivery system is not as clear as part of the solution as it should be. And then you've got communities. They are not helpless and hopeless. They don't feel like victims. They feel, that's why you will find a lot of grannies looking after children, their own grandchildren and other people's children. They feel that it's under their control. And so you already have infrastructure. You have children who are excluded. It's important to understand why. And SmartStart committed itself 10 years ago. We obsessed with that and building the access system. But you're working with individuals' own agency. You're not working with helplessness. And a mindset shift that starts to see them as partners. I do get a little bit irritated when we call them gogos. I know I just said gogo. Gogo is a South African word that means granny. So our average age of practitioners is about 38. So, honestly, they are not grannies. I think there's an underlying disrespect of a powerful asset in our country when the delivery system does not make that visible. And when organizations like us don't make the connections between where I am to where Zahira is, to where Tess is, and eventually to where Kulula is, and back again to be accountable to those communities we're solving for. Now, Awa, what was your question?
Seriously, I'm very happy you described the system, the delivery system, because we're here to talk about systems change, but you can't have the system change without a delivery system.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So the question really is, if for this people have come here, is that what is the one shift you
Yeah.
think that enabled you to get to the next level?
Yeah. I think they're absolutely spot on. That function shift was the major game changer, and a set of leaders who think in collaboration, who don't feel threatened by us pointing out the gaps, and in some ways our own mindset shift too, that we assume that government does not get things right because they don't want to, they don't care. But when you meet human beings, you actually realize the possibilities lie in the mutual respect between us. That was a real mindset shift. It's slightly preceded by what Tess was talking about. Like that whole movement around real reform for ECD, it left us with 5 clear objectives of what we said needed to reform. For me, that's another real, by the time DBE came on board, we had an agenda for them. We had policy briefs. We knew what needed to change. We were already working on the Children's Amendment Bill together. So, that was a real powerful thing that, as you say, it's an opportunity for communities to be representing themselves, their own voice. I think my team in the room would be very upset if I didn't mention work in progress, really, but a mindset shift that says quality looks like a building and misses that quality outcomes is a powerful, loving, supportive relationship between a child and a practitioner who themselves feel competent, supported, and seen in a system. For me, that's where we are able to unlock access for the most excluded, because we now see them as value. The fact that they're delivering this wonderful, wonderful work in a shack doesn't mean it's bad quality. And our evidence has begun to show us that.
Oh, thank you. I'm seeing a lot of nodding there. So, Zahira, did you want to say anything? I know, Kulula, you mentioned eCares, the digital platform, earlier in terms of one of the key things. Did you want to say more about political will or the digital enablers before we move on to the final section, which is really the role of philanthropy, which you've touched on?
I don't think I'll touch more on e-case, but I think and I don't know if you guys purposely left out the big allocations, because I'm the one that only talks about the money, so I don't know if it did that on purpose. So
Coming to the money.
well, you can take the money.
Do you want to take the money?
Why don't you take the money?
Oh,
You take the money.
I could, but I wouldn't have the money without you. That must be made very clear. Without you and your team of very clever people who know which buttons to push and which numbers to crunch and how to crunch those numbers, we wouldn't have this money. But we wouldn't have this money without the work that you did, starting up that movement, and everybody who is sitting here who contributed to putting together a narrative about the importance of ECD and how ECD is worth government investment. When we got the function, National Treasury said, don't talk to us, bring data. We don't even know how many children you have. We don't know anything about you, bring data. And so all of those organizations and all of you sitting, except you, Awo, sitting here with us today, contributed to helping us to have that ECD census, contributed to the Thrive by 5. We also had a public expenditure and institutional review that told us what was being funded in terms of government institutions and whether that funding was linked to child outcomes. And all of that allowed us to be able to go to Treasury and to say we have a compelling case for investment in ECD. But the work that Ilifa Lamandona had been doing for years paid up at the right time. We're sitting here with an unprecedented injection into ECD of 10 billion. Something that had never happened in South Africa. Tess was right. When all the other sectors are having their budgets shrinking, ECD is really being understood as a very first stepping stone if we want the prospects of not just our children and their families and communities to improve, but of the entire nation. And so really, I want to say that about the money. But I think Zahira perhaps can continue on and build on that. And it's not just only money that comes from government. Maybe your last part about philanthropy and its role in private sector. I do want to acknowledge that we have had funding coming from the non-state sector to blend with the funding that we have to be able to do the huge things that we are doing and to dream big. So thank you. Maybe do I may also talk also about the political will, since I come from government. I think it's authentic if it comes from government. So the political will was really shown even way back as in 2012, that we had leaders in government who knew what it would do for this country and for its children if we were to shift that function. But let's talk about today. What does political will look like for a country? It looks like a country that does what Treasury does, who says, I believe in you, I'll give you this money. It looks like a president who, when he addresses the nation, never fails to talk about the need for us to strengthen early learning or early childhood care and education. It talks about a president who sits at the helm of a ministerial task team or committee that he convenes twice every year. And it looks like accountability in terms of all of those ministers. You, as the minister of this department, this is your portfolio. What have you done? And so we have a tracking system that checks what it is that is. But on the 8th of May, again, we are sitting now with the president and all of the ministers. So we have all of these organizations that are understanding, maybe for the first time, what their roles in changing the lives of children and changing the lives of South Africa should look like and what it is that they can do. We know that ECCE is an integrated function. Yes, we are championing it as the department, but I want to say that we see those ministers, they really are honest about their roles.
Wonderful, wonderful. Did you want to add?
One small thing. What I saw shift with the announcement of the $500 million that came into ECD was a shift in sentiment. Where we're coming with a sector that's just felt neglected by government, and just seeing that positivity and that excitement from the WhatsApp groups that are going around, for example, and just generally a decline in the negativity towards ECD, towards the state. So that for me is something that, and I think it's important, and why it's important for me is that I feel it comes with a sense of responsibility, that we've generated the excitement, we've got the sentiment up, and there's a big responsibility, I feel, on all of us to make sure that we maintain that. We don't disappoint our practitioners at the end of the day. So that a cash injection really, it touched on lots of people and created also another wave of momentum that we've just got to work really hard to sustain.
So thank you very much. We started about half an hour late, and I know what Skoll is like. People have to rush. So I do want to come finally to just one question on the role of philanthropy, because philanthropy was there at the beginning of SmartStart, and I think I rarely hear of that kind of partnership at the beginning. So the one question I have for the panel is, looking back, what kinds of philanthropic capital or private sector capital were actually catalytic? And maybe I'll leave it to your discretion, because some of the answers to that question may be known to the audience. Maybe take it the other way and ask and tell us what didn't help. Grace, you've already mentioned donor behavior sometimes pitting us organizations against each other. That's, I think, a very clear thing, rather than helping to build a coalition. So I leave it to your discretion whether you want to say this helped or please stop doing this other thing. Who wants to go first?
Okay. Oh, but no.
Kolula? Or
Let's give it to. Okay.
the sisterhood is being very...
You want to start, sister? Let me start then. Can you cooperate? You start.
We, as government, when we opened the door I think what we saw gushing in was this wave of wanting to do things together, this hope, and I think Zahira, I think I'm happy that you are touching and talking about something that could be seen as an intangible, the hope, the joy that is there, and coming to the intangibles, I think we have the philanthropic organizations that have also helped us to kind of develop and manufacture a kind of a glue that binds us together. I'm going to come to the tangible, the money, the purse, that binds us together. When we reflected upon our ways of doing things that were really ineffective, and looking at what assets and talents already exist, so was this movement that Tess is talking about. And we knew that we could grow that movement. So today we're talking about a movement that has helped us to develop a blueprint for collaboration and coordination and coalition in South Africa that has been enabled by philanthropy. So I just don't want us to look at what philanthropy can do just in terms of rands or dollars. It's really way more than that. The blueprint that has been developed in South Africa that looks at how the ecosystem can be enabled, can be sustained, has been really majorly supported and enabled by that philanthropy. We have seen National Treasury coming to the party with that huge injection. And I've spoken about blending finances. So we've seen a philanthropic organization saying, where are your shortages, where are your gaps? Can we come in and help you blend finances? We are experimenting with results-based financing as we speak, and that has been enabled by philanthropy. But we needed systems to be able to ground and anchor all of that. And without the systems work, that is work that doesn't pay off today, we wouldn't have the kind of infrastructure that we require to be able to anchor all of these developments. And philanthropic mindset for me really showed up. They came to the room and they were present and showed up and saying, we want to support you build systems. And I think I want to limit it to that because I think there are other things that my colleagues can add, but that was really powerful because sometimes we were used to working with organizations and donors that wanted to fund and wanted to work on things that can be ticked off the box, that can be put on billboards. Systems work is deep and tiring, and to have organizations that are willing to dirty their hands and say that we're not going to see results tomorrow, but what we're building is something that will sustain and that will have longevity. I take my hat off for them for that.
Which is a lot of there are not a lot of funders who are willing to back advocacy work, and particularly advocacy work in an ecosystem. And I think what's unique in this instance is we've managed to bring funders who haven't traditionally funded social justice, movement building, or advocacy work to do that in the ECD context, which I think is quite unique. And that work is long-term work. I mean, even the progress we've made on the Children's Amendment Bill, I think that all our estimations of how long that process would take, I think, are essentially doubled. And so also, having a long view is essential. But the advocacy piece, I think, has been really, really important, building a movement behind these reforms. We have all the evidence around how important investment in ECD is, but we don't necessarily see that translating into budgets and plans at government level. And so how do we make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to have the necessary pressure to ensure that this is a political priority continuously over the long haul? And I think making investments in this piece of the ecosystem is a really important part of that.
So none of my colleagues actually want to talk about what's not working. Oh. So I'm going to give it a shot just for a hero experience from us. And I think
what I feel there is a bit more funders of land. We must get a bit more conscious about the power that they wield. It's not a um. It's sometimes I'm very fortunate in my own little circle. We don't have a power dynamic, but you see playing out in other organizations. It's not an equal base. Um, I feel it's not an intentional thing, but I think at times we're not the funder base is not conscious enough of how they show up and how that impacts on relationship within an ecosystem, how sometimes it can potentially put partners in difficult situations in terms of how you move on the chessboard. Sometimes by word of how you show up as a funder, you inadvertently push somebody completely off a chessboard without even realizing that you're basically doing that. And you can actually disrupt unintentionally as Gokula an entire ecosystem of what's already in there. So just be more conscious of how you enter into a space and how you wield your power is something that I feel would be good to see a little bit more from our benefits.
And then Grace. Yeah. And then I promise we're going to have some questions.
So my funders threw a party for us last night. So I'm going to be very, very positive about them. So we were just in this fortunate position where SmartStart was founded by a group of funders who felt that they wanted to create a more sustainable system to invest into, rather than, as you can imagine, we painted a picture of a fragmented system. And so that means donations here, there, and everywhere. What that did is give us such a powerful space to think deeply about the problem we're trying to solve, stay committed to the problem rather than being divided between accountability to a funder and the problem you're trying to solve, which is what the big risk is. So behaving as like a catalyst for understanding solutioning and showing the path to potential solutions that can help us in a sustainable way. That are the roles, that's one of the roles that funders can play. We've also unfortunately had experiences along the way, and we've lost some of our funders. They are not, I must be honest with you, I hope there's a lot of South African supporters in the room, not a lot of systems thinking funders in South Africa. And so we were in a very unique position, and unfortunately enviable position, that made our work really tough, because everyone thinks, oh, they're flush, that's why they're successful, whatever. And then, that means other funders in the ecosystem are careful not to fund SmartStart because they must fund the rest of the ones who are not funded, and so on. Funders have a powerful, the same way that philanthropy expects and loves to and would require us to connect the dots between delivery partners. Delivery requires the philanthropy to do the same. And equality of power, assuming that money is the more powerful of the scale, terrible analogy, but like you need both delivery and finances. And often the finances assume superiority. And that's where, you end up doing what, and sometimes it's a very junior person, I don't mean to be rude, who comes and tells you what to do. When you've invested data time, employ some of the best experts in the topic, in the thing that you're trying to solve. So, I think those power dynamics that Zahira is talking about are some of the biggest lockers and unlockers of philanthropy as a partner.
Thank you so much. And we are going to have one of those partners close us out, I should say, David. We can now, thank you so much, take a few questions. I think we're supposed to finish at 9:45. Is that right? So if anyone has a question, please say your name in case not everybody knows you and your organization. Please put your hand up. We'll take a few. We have one there. Is there a microphone for the gentleman? Oh, you will have to speak loudly.
I'll speak. So, hi, candidate Bates. I apologize if you already covered this. But my name is Samuel Zastrom. I'm a co-founder of an education impact startup. We work with older students, but what I'm very interested in is quantifying very long-term effects of more earlier education, and at least in the long run, we in our organization would like to support more philanthropy like current education. And I'm just interested in the sort of understanding like how you convey that message to, and like just want to learn more about that.
Can I just check if there's another question and then we'll take two? Wonderful. We have one here.
I'll be quick. Thank you so much just for just listening to you reflect on the journey. Because since I developed on DGNT, one of the things that I think is remiss not to talk about is the relation of it. Because I've heard each of you speak about it in different aspects, and I'm important that's been to the systems change work as well as the trust. So maybe one or two of you can reflect on that, because I do think it's the invisible labor that sits behind a lot of work to be able to drive.
Okay, so we'll take those two. Who would like to address either speaking more to the trust or really the question around the early learning and the measurement?
I can try. I'm not going to give you measurement. I think, the investing in the early years, certainly in our context, gives us four big outcomes. One is the actual long-term returns on investment in children. And that long-term investment in children, I mean, I think David just remembered to say exactly what it is, but it's been measured in the long term in contribution to a gross domestic product of countries. So it's really significant. But the second thing, in context like ours, is that what we also have not really measured, but is powerful, is a lot of women stay at home when they need a second income in the home because there isn't childcare. And so the labor participation of women as an outcome to an investment like this is a really important thing that we don't focus enough on in our measurement. SmartStart is reviewing its current social return on investment study in order for us to actually have those kinds of measurements. The third one is, we were talking about these women who deliver the work. All of them work as enterprises, but unfortunately for many of them, particularly in low-income communities, they continue to be below living wage. But what you do get is meaningful livelihood for the deliverer of that quality right now. So that's one of those that returns immediately in like improved economic livelihood for families. We also did a study in SmartStart in partnership with one of the funders that actually measured that for us. But the last thing, but that is often invisible because we're not there, is it's like just helping to build, like just contributing to the care economy in a community. It's like really building the ability for cash exchange in some of the most deprived communities. So if you give us time, we can tell you, we have lots to say about how absolutely fantastic, important, and a no-brainer investment in the early years is. I hope that answers your question. I've formed wonderful sisterhood with these women and a few that are not on here. I probably spend just a little more time raising funds for tests than I do for SmartStart. And she knows that because that's what makes a system work. When you feel their success will enable our success. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I should add, Van Leer Foundation, who are not here, are going to publish a study they supported recently in terms of the investment the fastest learners in terms of brain plasticity are 0 to 3. And then the second fastest learners, does anyone know who they are? Caregivers.
Yeah.
Your practitioners. In terms of, it's incredible. So what a huge investment to support the caregivers as well as the children. Trust. Kalula, you want to speak to this?
Thank you. And just to add to what you, I think I switched it off you and Grace said, I think there's already tons of evidence that are in existence in addition to what you said. I think Prof. Hackman has, and we would make reference all over the world now to the Hackman curve. And I think if you can then just get your hands and lay your hands on that data. The Lancet papers also really just also do show the investment in early years. So evidence is there that links to why it's important and to invest early and what that does for children as they enter school and grow and become the kind of formidable human beings that this world requires. Let's talk about trust. We've spoken about systems. I can say you're right. We've spoken about systems. We've also spoken about a lot from data. None of those do the work. It's humans who get to do the work. We can talk about collaboration, and it's people that have to collaborate. So they are the most important infrastructure that is required to hold and anchor all of this. Grace just spoke about sisterhood. I want to also add brotherhood that exists in the ecosystem amongst all of these actors. What we saw as an important ingredient from the word go to strengthen and build that infrastructure was trust. And it was a commitment to leaving eagles outside the door and to bringing the best of each and every one of us. When we sit around the table as equals. We respect what each person is bringing. And what I want to say that it's something that you have to be committed to. You work at, you reflect, walking into the space and coming out of that space, you reflect, you take charge of your own behavior, how you show up. That is government. We aren't big brothers. We could have been perhaps at fault of doing that thing. And we know we government and no. Doesn't work that way. And so I think for me, this is what we were very committed to, building trust. You don't find trust sitting at the table waiting for you. You build it. And it can be threatened by very small and little things. And also to have the ability, if you've gone off track, to come to reflect and to come back on track. And I think that has been what has characterized our relationship. Grace has spoken about societal, because I want to say that this human capital does not only exist at the level of at which we cooperate. You find it from the grassroots. And those are the societal networks that we were talking about, women that have to trust that they can be supported by government. And if they can be supported by government, they can be supported by the NGOs, by the private sector, by the philanthropies. And it's then that we can leverage their power. So for us, it became very clear that without the human element, we couldn't really move the needle. We've had organizations like SmartStart deploying people into government. Was it you this morning who said that, oh, I hear that your team is growing? And I said, I'm not paying them. It's growing, but I'm not paying them. They are paid by my partners, by the coalition. But we've also said we're open for business as government. Come, work with us. Bring your brains trust. Bring your capital that we do not have. We need to be able to trust one another to be able to do that. So people are so important.
Thank you so much. I know there was one question. So as moderator, what I'm going to say is if you can say your question, I'll go to David. And in the mingling that may happen, you can come and ask any of the panel. So You know what the question is. Please say your question, and then we'll go to David to close us out.
I'm Alki Farmer from Masi. I work in Masculere. We deliver a schools for development program. And just thank you for elevating the collaboration here, because it's exactly what we are doing. We're building an ecosystem in a community through the entry of sports for development. So my question is actually to Palula, because I know that DBE has a MOU with Sports for Development, and we have tried through DCAS to potentially build partnerships with government. And understanding your experience here, I would like to obviously just have a conversation with you afterwards to see how we could potentially understand how we navigate that space, really. So yeah, just to say thank you and congratulations to SmartStart as well.
Thank you very much, Kulula. So you know when there's a line of people, she's first. After. Yeah. So, David, CEO of DG Murray Trust, you've been referenced many times in these celebrations. I want you to have the final reflections for this amazing panel and incredible coalition.
Thank you so much, and it's fantastic to be here to celebrate the system that's developed, of which SmartStart is such an important part. I don't like being called a philanthropist. I just in South Africa we don't even call ourselves that. We're a South African foundation, but to those in South Africa, we hope we're seen as a public innovator through strategic investment, but also through hustling, through sleeves rolled up, very much working together, literally day by day, with our implementing partners to bring about the change, together with the other funders that have come in and joined, either from the beginning or along the road, along the way. So I mean, I think we do have quite a unique personality as a cluster of funders that's held together by trust. We're not patient investors, we're restless patient investors. We understand that if change is going to happen, it's not simply going to be sticking with it for the next 20 years. It's about incrementally bringing about change every single day, even if you can't see it, because the trajectory between where you would have been and where you are now might be a small distance apart at the beginning. But you have to keep working. You have to keep working. You have to be restless in the work that you're doing. Very deliberate. We've heard today how together a whole ecosystem of support has been developed, bottom up. Innovation Edge, which was established to foster support, bottom up innovation. The programmatic, the delivery platforms that have been created, the system support piece that Ilifa Labankana brings to the table, the demand side that Rural Reform for ECB brings to the table, the compelling evidence that has come through the work of Data Drive 2030, developing those tools, the engagement with the private sector, not coincidental, really being shaped in a deliberate way, but in a very flexible, very adaptive way. All of those pieces coming together, supported by a group of funders. Funders that are not funding a program, but funders that are committed to a particular goal. Absolutely committed to achieving that, whatever it takes. And that means doing things often in a very different way than philanthropy usually does. And now getting to the point, we're having, to some extent, with implementing partners who in South Africa have really been engaged in early childhood development since the 1940s, when the apartheid government stopped funding black children in early learning programs. But getting behind them, supporting them over time, getting to the point where we all recognize that all of us were working with the children that we saw and were totally blind to the children that we weren't seeing. That we needed population-based approach. We needed the goal that every single child in South Africa would be able to have the opportunity of of early learning. And so now, being able to convert what we do from pioneers, from pathfinders, to handing over the leadership as we continue to climb the hill to government, finding ways to support, to nurture, to get behind, to boost that effort. At the same time, always having a few outriders on the other side of the hill, looking for the challenges, looking for the new opportunities to bring about real gains, in our case, for children in South Africa. Thank you very much, and thank you to those of you who've been such profound supporters in so many different ways along our journey. Thank you.